Hi guys, I'm Miss Coffee, and I'm going to start a new segment today called Tough Topics. Today's tough topic is a really tough topic, and it's one that we're not really used to talking about, and that's why I think it's so important that we do talk about it, and that's racism. Racism can be a really scary thing to talk about because maybe we feel embarrassed or awkward or ashamed. Maybe we don't want to say the wrong thing and risk offending people. But the worst conversation we can have about racism, the one where we mess up the most, is when we don't talk about it at all. Especially when we see every single day people dying because of racism, where it's still prevalent in 2020 and not a lot is changing. So it needs to be a conversation that we have. And you can talk about really monumental moments in history, like the civil rights movement and things like that. We can talk about slavery and use those examples. And I think that that's great, that we should be talking about that because it is part of our history and it is part of where we are today. I think that oftentimes when we talk about those topics, we see them as history, that it's not relevant today and that we don't, oh, that was way back when, and we're not like that anymore. We don't have slaves, so we're not racist. And it's like, it did happen in our history, but it's happening today too. And I just found out about another man who was killed during a brutal police raid, and I can't sit by any longer. So I want to start this conversation, and that's what this is. It is starting a conversation. This is a way for parents and siblings and friends to open up and talk about it. This is by no means an end of the conversation. I think one way that makes it a little bit easier to talk about it, especially with our kids, is by reading a book. And so I have a really great one I'm going to read to us before I get into more of my conversation. But we can talk about racism by looking at the media, looking at the news, looking at other books, historic books, or even newer books. So I think it's really important that we have these conversations because it's everywhere and it affects all of us, no matter what we think, no matter what your race is. So I'm going to read this book. It is called A Kid's Book About Racism by Jelani Memory. I can relate to this book on a personal level because I, like Jelani, am mixed. My biological father is mixed himself, and my mother is white, and so I am mixed. And so it doesn't matter if you're biracial, if you're one race, if you're white, if you're black, if you're native. I think racism affects all of us, every single race. In every single country, there is some sort of racism. So I really think it's important that we talk about it. So this book is called A Kid's Book About Racism. I'm going to read the intro because I think that's really important. So it says, "We grown-ups try to teach kids as much as possible as they grow up. Things like how to say your ABCs, ride a bike, and when to say please and thank you. And even bigger things like how to date, when to quit something, and how to forgive. But there are a handful of important topics we often never get around to talking about. Things that are simply too hard to just bring up. Racism is one of those topics. And yet, what age is too early for kids to learn about racism? When is it too soon for kids to learn about how to treat those who look different? Who is supposed to help kids learn about racism?" This is a book designed to help get the conversation started, to help grown-ups and kids alike wade into a really tough topic and hopefully spark the first of many conversations to come about racism. Enjoy. This is a book about racism. For kids. Sorry, for reals. And yes, it is really for kids. It's a good book to read with a grown-up because you'll have lots to talk about afterward. Just you? Keep reading. The book won't bite. I'm going to scoot back so you can see it. Now to introduce myself. My name is Jelani. My skin color looks like this. If you're colorblind, this is the color brown. Because my dad is black and my mom is white. which makes me mixed. Or African American, biracial, black, or a person of color. I'm proud of who I am and the color of my skin. But because of my skin color, people aren't always nice to me. Sometimes I get called names. Other times, it's worse. The person doing it might not even realize that it hurts me a lot. And when they treat me that way, it makes me feel small. You see, some people believe that having different color skin means you aren't as good as others. That's called racism. What is racism? Racism means to hate someone, exclude them, or treat them badly because of their race or the color of their skin. It happens all the time. Not just in big ways. But sometimes it shows up in small ways, ways that are almost invisible. Like a look, a comment, a question, a thought, a joke, a word, or a belief. Racism is one of the worst kinds of mean someone can be because racism thinks being different is bad. But being different is actually good. Like really, really. Really, 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 almost there, I promise. Really, 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 really good. 1000% good. Because being different means we have so much more to offer each other. Things like help, ideas, strength, skills, creativity, life, patience, respect, community, love, knowledge, experience, perspective, insight, diversity, wisdom, empathy, and originality. The whole being different thing, it makes us better, much better. So if you see someone being treated badly, made fun of, or excluded from playing or looked down on because of their skin color, call it racism. I'm going to read the outro to you too. Now that you've made it to the end of the book, what comes next? Well, if you're a grown-up who read this to a kid, my hope is a lot. They should have a million questions for you, like, has anyone ever been racist to you? Or Do some people not like me because of the color of my skin? Take their curiosity and make the most of it. I can promise you that you're more afraid than they are to talk about racism. So talk about your experience with racism or that of your friends. Talk about our country's history and the civil rights movement. And above all, be honest. Kids are ready and willing to learn about tough things if only the grown-ups present in their lives are willing to talk about them. And you can find other books similar to this one on topics like belonging, feminism, creativity, money, depression, failure, gratitude, adventure, cancer, body image, and mindfulness at akidsbookabout.com. And if you do have a further conversation, you can share your read and share your conversation at A Kid's Book About. Let people know you're having these conversations because they're incredibly important. If we just pretend like racism doesn't exist, we're not going to change. And that's exactly what we have to do. We need to realize that racism isn't this immovable character flaw. That if you have racist tendencies or racist thoughts, or if you know somebody who does, they can change. You can rewire your brain to be focused on love. I am a firm believer in conscious discipline, and it says that what we put in, we get out. What you focus your attention on is what you will get. And if we focus our attention on love and belonging and acceptance, that's what we're going to get. Something that you can do to help curb racism is do some research. Find out legislators that you can vote for that are going to have everyone's best interest in mind. You can find out what resources are available to you. If you see something racist happening, you can step in and do the right thing and make sure that that person who's a victim is okay and that the person who is doing the racist act is reprimanded. Even if that's socially, call them out. It is okay. Even if it is your friend, if it is a police officer or a teacher or anybody who is doing these kinds of things, call them out. Let them know that you're not okay with that and that it's unacceptable and that we as a society are tired of this. If you are someone who is white, who doesn't have to deal with racism on a daily basis, or ever potentially, be an ally, be an advocate, stand up and say something. You know, we are all one people. It would be incredibly boring if you bought a box of crayons and they were all the same color. It would be boring if every single dog was the same dog. And it would be boring if every single person was the same person. And we have to be accepting and acknowledge and value everybody's worth. And it breaks my heart that every day I see things in the news, people videotaping police officers or teachers or anybody doing awful things to people just because they're black or a different race or they're native. And just because it doesn't affect some people, they don't do anything about it. And I think that's really wrong. We need to be talking to our children and to the youth on a very frequent basis about racism. If you're watching a movie and you notice something, pause it and have that conversation. You could pause any Disney movie and say, think about all the Disney princesses. What's something a lot of them have in common? Or, do you think anybody could be a princess? Could you be a princess? Even if you don't look like the majority of them. And we could talk about, progress that we're making and that, we do have a black princess now and that we're expanding, the type of media that we see. And this, theme of acceptance isn't just racism. Now, most of this conversation is specifically about racism, but we have homophobia and transphobia and all these negative energies about certain people. And, we need to stop that. We need to be talking about, why would we treat them differently? And they deserve our utmost respect and care. And those things are very important. If you're listening to a song and you hear something, talk to your kid about it. Or if they're, I teach elementary school, I hear kids singing songs and they have no idea the meaning behind it. They just think it's a catchy tune and that it's cool and they're saying things that I don't think they fully understand. And so a lot of times I'll say like, hey buddy, that's not an appropriate song for school, and they don't know why. They have no idea. They don't even realize that these words are powerful. These words have meaning. So if you hear your child, singing it, just say something. Ask them, hey, do you know what that means? And then have that conversation. That's how they learn. And that's how we end this negative and this hate, is by talking about it and bringing it to light and telling everybody that we're not okay with it. I think that that's so vital. And there are so many great platforms that we can do it on now. There's TikTok and Twitter and Facebook and YouTube and, websites and all of these amazing resources we have, these books, and, it's just incredible the amount of ways that we can have these types of conversation. And, it might feel awkward at first, but the more you do it, the easier it becomes. Do a little bit of research so that you maybe know more about what you're talking about. Or, if your child asks you a question and you don't know the answer, look it up together. Show them that you don't have to know everything, but that, inquiry and figuring it out and learning from others is important. Ask people. If you have friends that are a different race than you, ask them, what experiences do you have? What do you do when this happens? How do you react? What should I do, as a bystander, and just find out. And I guarantee you they're going to appreciate it, because they maybe feel alone and secluded and isolated because of their skin. And we don't have to feel that way. We don't. We can be one people. We are one people. Race, sometimes we think of it as a scary topic, but race is beautiful. Every skin tone, every hair type, every, eye color and body shape, these are all really beautiful things that get me excited. And I look at these women and men, on TikTok or Instagram or whatever, and I'm like, she's beautiful, or his skin is flawless. Look at his hair. I wish I could do that, and we should be gassing each other up and getting excited and loving each other for our differences, instead of breaking people down. And I think that there's a big chunk of people who don't fall in a racist category, but they fall in a bystander category, where they know these things are happening. Maybe they see it on the news, they see it in the media, they don't do anything. They don't have these conversations, they don't rally, they don't care necessarily because it doesn't affect them. And that is unacceptable. It is. Because we're not going to see change until we make change happen. We have power. People have power. Especially the ones that racism don't affect. And so white people have power, immense power. They do. Everybody does. But if everybody, especially white people, stood up to police brutality and things like that, it would stop. It would. But not everybody does. Not everybody cares. It doesn't affect them. And that's really unacceptable. And so my job as a teacher is to foster these conversations. But it can't stop there. It can't just happen once or twice in school. It can't only happen during Black History Month. It can't only happen when we're talking about the Holocaust, or when we're talking about Native Americans. It can't only happen in historical contexts, because this is not a historical problem. It is a today problem that we are facing on a very regular basis, and it truly breaks my heart. And I hope that this video is encouraging you and inspiring you to stand up and say something and get involved, because we're the ones dying. People are dying, and that's what we need to see them as. We need to understand that every single person is a person. They're not a race. They have race, but they are a person. And I hope that I've encouraged you to talk to your children, talk to your students, talk to your siblings and your friends, talk to yourself, and find out what your own biases are, because we all have them. I have them. Everybody has them, because that's, the world that we grow up in, watching media, seeing the news, and, we have these associations. They're wrong, but we have them. And racism comes from when we take our biases and we act on them purposefully. And we need to look into ourselves and say, hey, what biases do I have? If I see a black person on the street, do I kind of avoid them? Do I hold my phone tighter or tighten my purse under my arm? Do I kind of move to the side? You know, when I see someone of Arab descent, do I assume they're a terrorist? When I see a Native American, do I think racist and immature thoughts? You know, do I go, oh, or something like that? Because those are inappropriate. Even if it's a secret thought you have in your mind, we have to stop, because when you have those thoughts on a regular basis, your mind becomes full of hate. And when our mind is full of hate, that is when we eventually act on them. We don't have to feel scared when we see a group of black men walking down the street. We don't have to worry when we're surrounded by people of a different race. We shouldn't have to. And I want you to know that I love all of you. That I am here to spread love and peace and joy and acceptance for everybody. For people of a different race. If you're a gay, lesbian, whatever. If you're a transgender. If you have special needs of any kind, of mental disability, of physical disability, whatever it is. I'm here to accept and love you, and I hope that everybody else is too. I really do love you, all of you. And just go out there and spread your positivity. Share your smile. Share your experiences. Ask people questions. Get involved. Please, for the sake of humanity, do your part.